Hi.
Hey.
I won't laugh. I won't laugh.
Don't think you can help it much.
How are you?
The positive confession or
Truth.
the truth? I'm exhausted.
Exhausted.
I'm physically exhausted. Physically and mentally exhausted. But I think it's really because my body's taken a beating the last couple of days.
How so?
I was coming down. I was coming down with something.
The cold.
Yeah, it's the initial days of a cold can be quite something. I think I underestimated the toll that it would have on my body.
Yeah.
So I think I'm still going through the motions of finding my mojo. So I still feel a bit weak, but it is well.
His grace is sufficient.
Absolutely.
Do you want to know how I am?
I was about to ask. How are you,
I'm
dear
just
husband?
I'm well. I'm well. Yeah, I think... what's the difference between a cold and a flu?
Honestly, I'm not too sure. I think they're used interchangeably. I don't know. And I'm not about to Google. I use them interchangeably. A cold sounds less intense than a flu, I think. For me, that's what it sounds like, but I don't know what the truth is.
Yeah, so I think it had the same effect, quite weekend. But I think I've pulled through.
No, you have actually. I think you had a bit of a relapse because you had it for a week, and I was fine. There was a part of me that was actually shocked that I hadn't caught it quickly, which bears testament to my immunity levels. They are quite high. So when you came to the tail end of that, it was about a week, and there was nothing on my side. I was like, yes. I think I celebrated too soon.
And I purpose not take any medication?
Yes, you purpose not take any medication. You just did some steaming and some clove tea. Yeah. I've been dying to give you clove tea for a long time. Clove tea and ginger tea, so I had the opportunity to get you to drink it.
I don't know if I want to have any more clove tea if you were to ask me.
No, your tolerance for certain things is quite low, so I wouldn't insist. I like taking clove tea.
What do you like about it?
I like the taste. I like the numbing effect that it has. Yeah, I know it's weird. It has a numbing effect, and I like the numbing effect in my mouth. But also I think psychologically, I feel like it's quite healthy. Yeah. So.
If you had a 5-star restaurant, would you serve?
On request. Chances I wouldn't make it to the menu. Unless, of course, I had this thing about like all sorts of teas, like unique teas.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that for some people, dawa tea is probably the same effect as clove tea. Okay, dawa tea is a bit... I think they do something to dawa tea in certain places and they make it taste...
I think...
Yeah, more palatable than cloves.
Okay,
the cloves are an acquired taste.
I should be on your team. I won't argue
Okay, the truth is, cloves are an acquired taste.
Yeah.
Even when you put them in pilau, they're an acquired taste. They have a very strong...
But in food, it may pass. It's just that tea is... tea is another thing. But anyway.
Yeah.
What do you like to talk about this morning? Or afternoon?
It is actually afternoon.
Or night?
That's probably one of the reasons. Oh yeah, depending on where people are. One of the reasons why I'm exhausted is because we're shooting at a slightly different time of the day. I don't know. I think one of the things that I was thinking about, mostly because on account of 2 conversations that I had over a space of, I think, 2 weeks. Yeah. One was on Saturday. Okay. It was a question, not a conversation. It was really a question from a family member. Okay. Remember when we were together?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you are. The conversations were quite diverse, but it had to do with work. Okay. Which I sort of I didn't misunderstand it. I think I have a habit of hearing things that I want to hear, I think, and then I respond maybe without necessarily thinking about what question is being asked. Yeah. And this is not to trigger you to start reminding me of those moments when I answer certain things differently. But yes, it was a question about work. but it also reminded me of a conversation I had with my sister about 2 weeks ago on account of work. And I'll start with my sister. She asked me a question and said, she asked me, honestly, the time that you were actively involved in work as we know it,
Yeah.
at your job as we know it, your 8 to 5 job, and now when you're not at an 8 to 5 job and you're working from home, working with your husband, the work that you're doing, blah, 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 where do you feel happiest?
Yeah.
That was actually happiest. When do you feel happiest? Where do you feel happiest? And where do you feel more at peace? Those were her very specific questions. And I think it's something she'd been pondering about as well, because she had a stint in employment, got out of employment, went into consultancy, then got back into employment, and it was a nightmare, then got out again. Yeah. And I told her, honestly, now I feel more at peace now than when I was in what we call formal employment as we know it.
Yeah.
You know, the 8 to 5 typical corporate type jobs. And I went on to explain to her that one of the things I like about my current state is the fact that let me take a step back. Yeah, one of the things I like about my current state is the flexibility. Because we work together and it's out of home. When I'm not feeling 100, it's comfortable for me to actually tell you, sweetheart, I'm not feeling 100. Can I take a break? And it's okay. But also, it's easier for me to, when I'm feeling 100 and plus, which is not that often, I think sometimes I slack a bit, it's okay for me to push myself and work until midnight. But because the work that I'm doing for me feels purposeful and meaningful, and it's not just about putting food on the table. I think that's where the difference is. For me, I can see what we're doing and how it contributes to changing lives in some shape or form.
Yeah.
And that for me gives me satisfaction.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why sometimes I'm able to push myself a little more. I think one of the pluses, one of the major pluses that I see from my previous kind of work was the regular paycheck. That one, you're guaranteed it was going to come on the 25th of the month. You actually even start spending before it comes. You tell people, 25th, I shall clear you. And it gives you a false sense of security because there's a paycheck coming. But I think I'd gotten to a point in my life where I would ask myself, I'd tell myself there has to be more than just working for a paycheck. Because you find that sometimes the actual paycheck is never even enough. Even when you get a pay rise, even when you get a better job that pays you more, for some reason, it's like the money keeps going into this big black hole and it just doesn't feel like it's enough. Then you start asking yourself, I have to be working for more than money. What does my work contribute to? How does it make a difference? And even as I was reflecting on this, I remember thinking to myself that in my entire very long career, the portion of my job that felt quite satisfactory, even though it wasn't paying that much, because it was like so many years ago, was the time that I actually worked with Power FM.
Okay.
And when I worked with Power FM, I obviously wasn't on air. I was more specifically working in the universities and secondary schools. That was my core work. And it was really trying to get these young people to understand and appreciate the message of abstinence. That for me, it was a short stint because we'd gotten funding at that time from Global Fund. So I went in to actually run that project. It was about 7 months or 8 months. But it was I felt like I was most valuable in my career then than any other work I have ever done. And I think it's because I felt like what I was doing was directly changing lives or impacting. It felt like there was a greater purpose. There's a greater purpose to it. And I think there comes a point in someone's life, I don't know if it has to do with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where they start questioning whether where they're at or what they're doing is what truly brings them satisfaction.
And I think when you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think that paints a very good picture, right? Because for a man who's trying to survive, what does meaning have to do with it?
No, they just need to keep a roof over their heads,
yes,
and put food on the table.
If you go on my Twitter, I have words there: love, live, legacy. Those words I came up with, I think, back in 2013, 2012. And they were sort of the guiding motto for the things I did. I knew I had to live, which is about meeting my basic needs. I had to love. That's a portion of me that's actually for the blessing of others. But then legacy, that is the things I do that are going to outlive me. But initially it was live, love, legacy. And I switched
Then
to
you switched
love,
it to
live,
love
legacy.
first.
And it was the deliberateness, the love ought to come first. And I think that has been the puzzle of my life. Of how do you, because some people in the pursuit of survival, everything else dies. I was talking to a friend the other day, and was telling me about his struggle in trying to find definition of who he is. But then as well, he gave me. I asked him for a opportunity to be his coach, and he granted it to me. And as we are assessing his situation, we realized that a lot of his decisions were informed by his means. So when he was considering about getting a house, he was thinking about the price range of the house, not the house. So now I got to realize that he actually he avoids his own definition by letting circumstances define. So
I can see why.
many of us have been defined by finances. You ask someone, why do you wear that top? Why do you wear that jean? Why do you wear that shoe? And you may find at the end of the day, the reason has a figure.
I can relate.
Yes. And yet instead someone could tell you, no, I like this. I like this. This is what I was going for. This is, right? And so it's that balancing act, right? Because in all fairness, the reason people think about price is you have to deal with the price, right? And you don't
At some
have
point you have to,
unlimited resources. But I think there's a point in life, the stretch level. I was talking to my sister-in-law the other day, and we're having a chat, and I told her that when you have a suitcase, you can have a tiny suitcase, and you fill it with clothes, and then you sit on it if it doesn't tie properly until you can tie it. So when you get a bigger suitcase, you're going to manage to put everything in there, and it will still be full. And that's what usually happens with people's lives. You find someone has a smaller salary, and somehow they are getting by in some way. But then the salary increases, and there's still no surplus.
Yeah.
And the part is that there's that point of squeeze. There's the point of squeeze. You don't think of the squeeze effort when you have plenty. The squeeze is in a moment where resources are tight, right? So now, when people make all their decisions according to how much money they have, they don't budget for the squeeze. You get? And the thing about the squeeze, my approach to life is we should be growing, right? And my view, I go back, as I'm looking now, I'm going back to 2016, because where most of the times I thought about stretching. And I realized that the resources catch up with where you stretch to. You get? Some people make decisions and say, when I get more money, I'll do X, Y, Z. But yet someone who actually does X, Y, Z may actually attract more money. Because when if you live in a house of 50K and you say, when I get more money, I'll move to a better house. Now, what energy is pushing you to want to move to a better house if the money hasn't moved? But if you moved to a 100K house, then because you already stretched yourself,
you'll have to find
that
the money.
stretch is constantly making you uncomfortable. You get? It keeps you uncomfortable, and you don't manage to actually find the avenues as how your resources align. You get? So I feel through the fact that our resources sometimes constrain what we are able to do. But my strategy in life is, there used to be the common saying, you ought to live within your means.
Or to cut your cloth. Cut your coat according to your cloth. That's actually what I kept thinking about when you were speaking.
And for me, what I learned, I don't live within my means, I live within my potential. Very interesting point of view, right? Because if I live within my means, what I used to ask people, if I live within my means, what happens if my means I earn 0 shillings per month? What are my means then?
0. Shall downsize yourself.
So do I go and sleep on the street? You see? And it's fascinating. I remember when I moved to the floor, one of the things I thought was, you know what, let me downgrade everything. Let me get in a house on the ground level. Low entry house. So I got a friend of mine and I said, you know what?
Let's go look.
I never thought of staying to Nansana, but for my humbling, let's go to Nansana and see the houses.
No.
So went to Nansana and saw the houses. I was like, I think it's not going to work. The idea was good. The reality was different. And I remember, but it also hit me. It's like, Felix, if you're on the floor in a very cheap house, then what is the basis of your faith? You get? If 1 million shillings can pay your rent for a year, then how is faith demonstrated? So I moved into a house of 1 million, 1.1 million. Yet I had no income or nothing. And my desire was that pressure of the rent, it requires me to engage my faith.
And speaking of, so there's the aspect of faith, which I am eternally thankful to you for giving me a new perspective on. But there's also something that I learned that I picked from you. Let me see if I can explain it. When your mindset is shaped around your resources, even when opportunities come, you may not necessarily, you can only see as far as your eyes can see. Even when someone presents you a blank check, because your mind is locked at, let me take a step back. If I'm living in a house that costs me 300,000 or 400 or 500,000, and it's because I feel like that's what my means can afford me. If an opportunity came my way to make a significant chunk of money, and I was asked how much money I wanted to be paid, which is technically a blank check, chances are when I name my price, I'm not going to name 3 million. I'm not going to say 3 million shillings because in my mind, I have no need for 3 million shillings. If my rent is 500,000, my transport is a certain amount of money, my clothing budget is a certain way if I have a budget. The price I am going to state is purely based on where I am at. And that means I'm going to shortchange myself. And that's something that you opened my eyes to. And I think it started with something as basic as, it actually informed my decision to stop doing voiceover commercials. Because I had done voiceover commercials from the time I was at campus. That was the first job I had, first gig I had. And I kept doing it. And the rate wasn't really changing in the market.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the first fights that we had.
And it was the first fight, sweetheart, but yeah.
Okay, one of the first money fights
Okay.
that we had. And I was thinking, why is he crying more than the bereaved? One of the first money fights that we had was on account of how do you actually work for that kind of money?
Yeah.
And I remember telling you, but that's what the industry pays.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, yes, that's what the industry pays, but that's not what the price tag should be for your voice.
Because your voice is distinct.
And I was like, okay, yeah, I know this guy and I know the other guy and I know how much they charge and blah, blah, blah. But there are these guys. And you kept telling me, no, that's not what you should be paid for your voice. Yeah. But you see, for me, in my mind, because, okay, first of all, there were additional reasons. Yeah. The reason was, really, what does it take for me to do, just to do my voice there? Yeah. I just sit, microphone, it costs me nothing. That's the way I perceive it.
Can I just pitch in there?
Yeah.
Now, do you see how the people who may have been blessed with certain things that could have set them on a journey of abundance, but because they undermined what they had,
they did not recognize.
They don't get the full value of it. You know, the Bible is that king that came to the prophet. And the prophet told him to pick the arrows and start shooting.
And he stopped at a certain point.
And he stopped. And the prophet's like, why did you stop? You get? Why did you stop? Because you would have destroyed them completely. So, in like manner, if you thought about the rate you charge is an arrow. 100K? No, let's do 200. Let's do 300. Let's do... Perhaps there's a figure at which you actually break free.
And actually, at some point, my argument used to be, for the longest time, my argument used to be, it doesn't cost me anything to maintain my voice, and I could do it in my sleep. It doesn't take a lot of my time. And I was like, it's fuel money. Yeah. It's just sufficient to put fuel in the car. And that was the mentality I had. So for the longest time, as long as I was available and I had time and someone called me, and of course now, the only thing that had changed was I wasn't going to lend my voice to literally everything. Yeah. It had to be something that maybe, if it was going to be a documentary, I would ask, what's the subject matter? Because then the subject matter would determine whether or not I wanted to put my voice to it. Yeah. Because that's carrying it. And then, because I moved from just taking any job that came, because there were seasons. I kept graduating from anything that came and it was just money, and I just took all the money that was on the table, because you don't leave money on the table. Yeah. To know that kind of documentary, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do. Yeah. If it's a documentary that has to do with children and stuff and blah, 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 that one probably I'll do and stuff. So enter Mohamed Chitaka. Yeah. And then I started thinking, but wait a minute, why am I being paid how much? Yeah. And I started feeling sweet. Yeah. I remember the time that I distinctly actually walked away was just before we got married, or was it after we got married? And I remember someone that I'd been doing work for a very, very long time. And I'd keep telling him, but dude, the rate that you're paying is like this rate. He's like, but you know what? Until I got to put, I said, you know what? I appreciate the work, but I'm sorry, you're going to have to find another voice. And he actually thought I was joking. Yeah. Until he kept calling me, and I'm like, I'm not joking. I'm not doing this work anymore. Yeah. Because I honestly feel that you ought to be paying a lot more. Yeah, I told him, I'm sure there are other voices that you can find. Please feel free. And it was with all humility. I'm like, feel free to find the voices. Yeah. It's just that the challenge he had at that point in time, his clients were sometimes asking for my voice. And I'm like, if you cannot ask for a rate that is commensurate to what I am saying right now, then I'm sorry, it can't work. But what that did for me was it set me on a certain course. And I remember the time you asked me to critically think about my rate. Yeah. I had hit a ceiling and I couldn't even think past a certain... First of all, my rate was always in shillings. It was in shillings. Yeah. And then, of course, after your guidance, compare with not just the local industry, but globally. If I wanted a certain job done for me and I went to Fiverr or to a certain international app, what are their rates looking like? How do they charge? And why? What are their reasons and stuff? And that opened up my eyes. So the first time I was like, okay, I'm going to charge X amount of money. Even for me, it feels like a lot of money. I was a bit uncomfortable.
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I was like, but Ruksana, how do you jump from here to here now? What are people going to think?
Yeah.
But the more I actually got it into my system, that this is not something that's random. It's something that God has given you to be able to utilize. It's a blessing.
Yeah.
So by you accepting the crumbs, you're not utilizing this blessing as it is. So I remember the first time, I think it was about maybe 2 years ago or 1.5 years ago, that I stated my rate in dollars. Even me, I was like, let me wait and see if they're going to actually accept. And there was no negotiation. I was like, okay, maybe now I undercharged the dollars. Maybe I should have increased the dollars. I was like, okay, let's take it a step by step. But I got to a place where I actually began to appreciate what I had. But also because there are certain other changes that I had made in my life.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of the changes in my life were on account of you. So I give thanks to God for you.
Glory to God.
Yeah. And then it was conceivable for me to ask for certain amounts of money because I had sort of also upgraded my life.
Yeah.
It was conceivable for me to ask for.
It reminds me of the documentary I was watching about the guy in the diamond business.
Yeah.
And he said when he went to apply for a job, the mom gave him $5,000. Not to use, just to put
just keep in his pocket.
Because you negotiate different $5,000 in your pocket. And I actually had, my plan was always to always have $500K in my pocket.
Just so you feel
No, it was
comfortable. If.
When I used to drive a Benz, back then, the last thing you'd want is a guy who drives a Benz having on the street stack, right?
Yeah, looking for.
So one of the things I'd like to do is have like $500K in my pocket, always. So somehow it gives you a false sense of security. Like you got everything that can go wrong is should fit within $500K.
Yeah.
If a border guy was knocked, yeah. If a policeman gave you a ticket, yeah. That sort of balance. But when he mentioned that, it was quite powerful, right? But I want you to go to negotiate when you haven't even eaten food.
Whatever they put on the table is going to look like it's sufficient.
No, but even what you're going to suggest, you won't have enough.
You don't have the confidence in you.
It's hilarious. Even your body faculties will stop and look at you.
Auntie, are you serious?
Play game now.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yes.
It's crazy.
And you know where it came from? My charging highly was I used to read a lot many years ago, and one time I read an article, and the gentleman was describing the difference between a freelance and a consultant. A freelancer and a consultant. And he said the freelancer sells his time. The consultant sells experience. That was a very key distinction for me.
And you can price. You can price your experience.
When you come as a freelancer, you're negotiating your time. You get? You're negotiating on time. When you come as a consultant, it's your experience. And your experience, there's no market price for your experience.
Your experience, yeah, that's
because
true.
Ruksana's experience and Felix's experience are distinctly different, right? And he made this suggestion, like, you know what? Just try to add the zero to whatever you've been charging.
Yeah, I remember you told me that, and my eyes widened.
And I'll never forget those years I was still staying home, and this client needed a project done, and I said, asked me, how much will it cost? And I said, what? They said $10,000.
And you were how old then? Like 20?
I think around 19. 20. Either I said 10,000 or 6,000. I think 10,000. And because Felix, that's a lot of money. And I think when we negotiated, we feel at 6.
Now imagine if you had started at 6. You'd end up
No, if I didn't have the 0 prints per $1,000, was good enough.
Oh,
If you are 20 staying at home,
really?
$1,000 around that time was decent, right? Because of this one, I quoted 10,000, and when they negotiated, I landed at 6. Even the, you know how they say aim for the stars, and when you fall, you fall on the other skies. So you're still high even when you fall, right? And when that started to work, I went on that sort of pace of defining. And nowadays, my rate increases every year. I purpose to add a link, I think $20 to my daily rate, which is still a bit conservative.
Yeah.
But depends on the products I've been selling. I think most times clients I've been working with, sometimes you can't just bump a client you've had a long time.
Yeah, it has to be just incremental.
But if you're a new guy that's encountering me, it may go a bit higher than usual. But where did we come from?
But I think where it also comes from is twofold. It's one, recognizing that even with this gift, let's call it a gift, that you have, or this talent that you have, that has the ability to make you productive and for you to receive money or means or resources, the recognition that you will be put to account for it.
Yeah.
You will account for it. It is the
good steward.
yes. It's the person who's given one and goes and buries it and says, I know this master of mine is a wicked master.
Yeah.
If anything happens to this, whatever I've been given, the talent or the coin, whatever I've been given, if anything happens to it, I'll be in trouble.
Yeah.
But there's someone who says, this is what I have. How can I actually multiply this? Because it's in the multiplying of what you have that you're then able to create more and then actually be a blessing. So it comes down to how you perceive what you have been given. If you think that what you have been given or the talent that you have is just to put food on your table, that is all you're going to do. Put food on your table. Everything is going to look like just an opportunity to feed you. And yet what God might want to do with you and in you and through you is for you to have more and have abundantly so that you can actually be a blessing to other people. It is very difficult, not impossible, but it is very difficult to be a blessing to other people when you're living from hand to mouth. Because everything you have is just enough for you. And yet, you have something in your hands. God has gifted you with something that you do not recognize as a blessing.
And I remember my former employer, when they reached out to me again, before they called me, I'd had a dream. And in that dream, I was being paid 1 million shillings per day. So when this former employer reaches out to me, I quoted the same price, 1 million shillings per day.
And there was no negotiation.
And they're like, that's a bit high. Now, one of the things I learned in sales is that you always have to be willing to walk away. That's the art of negotiation. And I think those of us who bought things in downtown growing up, you sort of build that.
You're told, just start, be as if you're walking away, they'll call you back.
Start to walk away and they call you. But some guys don't call you back.
They're like,
then it gets awkward.
And yet you really want it.
Then you come back when the guy didn't call you. You just mess up your negotiating power.
You've lost it actually at that point in time.
Interestingly, I learned the same thing when I was still a single man. I don't chase women. When you chase a woman, your negotiation is down immediately, right? And so where was I?
The 1 million shillings that you asked for at your
so
work per day.
What's strange, I was sleeping on the floor, but I was willing to walk away. You see, and then that's the thing about negotiation. I keep telling people that in life I learned you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. The difference between you paying your rent and paying your bills be up to how much did you negotiate. You get? And so I decided to hold my position, because at the same time, if you move your position easily,
then it's like you are not certain about the value.
Perhaps you're not even valuable.
You're not, yeah.
Right? And I think these are the things women sort of knew much earlier, because they had, I think they were taught to not be so available. If a guy reaches out to you, don't be so quick.
Way back when, before life changed.
Yes. And I remember when I was a young man, I had much trouble with women on that account. You meet this lady and sincerely interested, and then you just can't wait to call her up, let me call you up, let you know it was good. And then as you come off like that, then you lose your negotiating power, and then somehow things don't go in your favor. And when I learned it, I was like, no matter who you are, same principle. I'm not going to sell what is it, to show my hand?
That's in cards. Yes.
Yes, you have to hold your position as the prize. And that's the mentality I had when I was learning how to, in the dating space, but also in sales. I found many parallels in the dating arena and in the sales arena. And the idea is that always think of yourself as the prize. Yes. And where that would get affected in the dating arena is if the clothes you wear are shady. If your confidence is not upright, it's hard for you to feel like the prize.
Yeah.
So the reason actually I positioned my life to be very okay, because there was nothing that would be a basis of doubting my prizeness. You get? So if I met a lady, I'm driving a Benz, I smell good, my clothes on point, my house is legit, I come to you from a point of a prize, and I can back it up, right?
I'm testament, I remember that.
Yeah, so, and that's the part about negotiation. And I hold my position, and they actually accepted, right? And so it's, when you think about it, is a lot of people may be paid peanuts because they couldn't negotiate for more. Because think about this. Not all people in workplaces are paid the same amounts of money.
No.
And what's interesting...
In certain types of organizations, yes.
What actually was interesting, initially I joined the company as working for as a subcontractor. And later on, they contracted me directly. Then, when they contracted me directly, the plan was to increase my pay, right? And as they gave me the quotation of what they wanted to pay me, it was less than I was being paid as a subcontractor. And my manager remarked and said, oh, you negotiated very well. Because for other people, by becoming directly contracted, their pay changed by a big margin. But mine didn't change by much.
Because you're already pretty much at the ceiling of what you should have been getting.
Exactly. So it was, it reminded me, learn to negotiate. And I see many people and... Yeah.
Speaking of negotiation, because sometimes when you talk about negotiation, and I feel like there are different types of negotiation. And as you were speaking, what came to my mind was the story of Esther.
Yeah.
So Esther gets into the kingdom. We know the circumstances under which Esther got into the kingdom. There was a queen who was feeling, who didn't know how to negotiate clearly. Yeah. She rebelled. She went to the route of rebellion as opposed to negotiation, and she lost sight of her place, in that kingdom. And as a result, she lost her position. Yeah. And while we know it was divinely orchestrated that Esther would then come in, Esther came in from a very humble background. Esther knew the rules because she had been, the rule book had been read to her. This is what you do. Yeah. You do not go to the king until the king calls you. Yeah. Just don't show up. And you wait for your turn. And she knew the rules. But because Esther understood her assignment, Esther recognized she had an assignment to carry out. Yeah. She just didn't land in the kingdom and wasn't chosen as the queen because she was the most beautiful. Okay, we don't know, they don't really talk about whether she was that beautiful, but they picked quite a number of women that they took in and they prepared and stuff. But she definitely found favor before the king. favor enough to become the next queen, but also because she had been in line, probably by destiny, to be able to be the one that would save her people or stand in the gap for her people to be saved. So she understood she was there for a reason. And while there were rules, she understood that at some point in time, based on the rules, it was going to be kind of difficult to do what she needed to do. Because she would have to wait for the king to show up. So what did Esther do? Because Esther understood why she was there and who was responsible for getting her there, she was appropriately plugged in. And because she was appropriately plugged in, when the time came and she wanted to speak to the king, even though she had not been called, she found the courage to go and tiptoe around the palace until the king said, it wasn't time, but he called her in. She could have gotten killed or gotten thrown out of the palace on account of just showing up before being called. But the relationship she had with God and understanding her calling and what she was there for and her purpose gave her the courage. That, in some shape or form, is a negotiation. And she went and she was able to present her case. But also, when she found favor before the king, and he was so endeared to her, and he asked her, what can I give you? How much of my kingdom do you want? She was focused. And I feel like sometimes when we are not focused, when we do not know where we are going or what we are working for, it is very easy to lose track. And when an offer is made, or when they ask you what you want, you might ask for far less than you could have possibly gotten because you're not focused. It's a man who's looking at, or a woman who's looking at her daily bread, and she asks for a salary increment to a certain value, or asks for something for herself or himself, and not necessarily for the team members. And I remember a friend of mine shared an experience at a place of work that she had gone to, and they had done very well on a particular project. And she was quite senior. She was senior in that role. They'd done very well, and they were dishing out shopping vouchers because that's what corporate organizations do. And given her position and her role in the project and stuff, I think she'd gotten shopping vouchers worth 1 million shillings. And that's a lot for someone who's working in the corporate world. But she recognized that the work that had been done, there were people lower down the chain that had been instrumental in doing the work as well. She didn't know that at that point in time that they had not been considered for the bonus vouchers. And she found the courage to go to HR and ask and say, how come the rest of the team members at this level downwards were not given vouchers? And HR said, but the second in line head in the unit said vouchers were given names of people to receive vouchers. And she said, no, that is not right. At least let us split the vouchers, because they had gotten a significant chunk. Let us split the vouchers so that everyone gets some. But of course, some of the team members were agreeable, but some of the more senior team members were not. They're not willing to split their vouchers, But I found it quite commendable. In a long story short, everyone ended up getting vouchers. So she had the heart to recognize and realize that while she was a leader and she had been given an opportunity and she'd been rewarded for her work, there were people that also deserved being rewarded for their work. And if I were to hazard a guess, it is very unlikely that going forward, when projects are done, the other people will not be considered because she stood. She was actually just in an acting position heading that project at that point in time because the actual person was on leave. So technically it wasn't even her unit. So for her to be able to do that speaks of someone who realizes that the position I am in is not just to benefit me. It is to be able to benefit other people as well. And I feel that someone like that will find more favor because they're not just thinking about themselves.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Esther did. Esther could have gotten into that palace and just gone on a party. I have finally arrived. I am the queen, and totally forgotten about her people that were enslaved. But on account of the fact that she stayed the course and ran the race, there was a far greater benefit and a far greater reward. And I think for me, this is where, even as we talk about jobs and where we have been placed, it's important for us to have a distinction in our mind between I am working for the money, because a job as we know it, the reward for a job is a paycheck. And that has its limitations. But when you realize that where you have been placed is more than just you putting food on your table, then you start, it makes it easier for you. The simplest way I can put it is to stand in the gap. How you stand in the gap is up to the one who put you there, if it was actually God who put you there. Sometimes it's about fighting for the rights of people who are trodden on. Sometimes it's about negotiating for better pay for your team members. And sometimes it's really just about knowing that even when I get more resources, I actually use those resources to be a blessing to other people. So what is your purpose where God has actually placed you? How can you be of more value to the world and to God where God has actually placed you?
Allow me to backtrack a bit.
Yeah.
You spoke about negotiation, because as you described the negotiation of Esther, you're really seeing leadership, and even the example you used. Really, the leader is the one who negotiates for their people. I never forget, I met a certain CEO, a head of an organization in this country, and I asked him, how would you define leadership? I told him it's about helping people achieve their fullest potential. And if you're to help people to achieve their fullest potential, it means you have to negotiate for them, right? But as you're speaking about negotiation, I realized it comes up a lot even in our interactions as people, right? Even in marriage, you two are working together, right? That sometimes you may have a different interest from mine, right? How do you negotiate for your interests? You get? And I remember most of the times when you reach out to me, it's like, can we call this person? And my mind is saying, what do we want? What do we want? You can't go into a negotiation before knowing what you want.
It has to be clear.
Yes, because on what basis are you negotiating if you don't know what you want? You can find someone who says, no, they're paying us poorly. They need to increase our pay. But you don't even know what pay you want to get to, right? And part of negotiation is to believe something so much that you're willing to lose for it.
You're willing to walk away.
Walk away, right? So, and the part that came for me was, which is keen to what we're talking about. You can't start negotiating if you don't have vision. You get? You can't expect your money is going to change. You're going to negotiate better pays, and you don't even have a vision to justify your negotiation.
To justify to yourself, first and foremost.
Yes, I think for me it's a sense of you need to plant what you want into some sort of truth, that it's more permanent, that it's firm. If it's just an idea, then it's something in the air that's not grounded. It's not grounded. Yes, that's actually the right word. Is how do you ground what you're negotiating for into something bigger, right? If you have a vision and say, for example, my children, the schools they're going to, they're not good for how they're going to turn out in life. The ideal school for my children is this one. And with this current pay, I can't pull it off. I can't do that. I need to be in this place. But also you look at your skills, right? Then you say, okay, and based on my skills, this should be able to, then you can negotiate for that, right? But to side also in a hand in terms of marriage is when I'm quite fairly decent at negotiation. I don't.
Decent? You're very good at negotiation.
Yeah, but the people who negotiate to squeeze people for every penny, right?
Okay.
And for some people may say I'm a terrible negotiator, because if I meet, like we met that guy who was going to ask us for 70,000 shillings to keep cutting the grass, right? And I told him, no, I want to pay you 50. He's like, say well, blah blah blah. I was like, Felix, it's 20K. You want to squeeze the man 20K off? And there's a part of me that says, when I give someone my money, is also a blessing. So my goal, and it's also perhaps an abundance mentality. You see, if you have a survival mentality, you want to reduce what gets away from you.
The idea of it's more blessed to give than to receive doesn't make
don't
sense.
tell me now. Bird in hand is worse to in the bush.
I think some of these idioms did us a disservice.
Exactly.
And they're not rooted in
It's
truth.
the wisdom of this world.
Yeah, it's the wisdom of the world.
see?
You're right.
And in that case, I'm like, no. But then I did something interesting. So
You increase the scope of work.
I added a bit of scope of work, but that scope of work is wanted to quote separately. I was like, no, let's just stick to the monthly pay. But at least you're starting in the middle of the month. We can start from there. Like, okay, let's do that. So it's a place of negotiation. But I actually see how, for example, my wife may be at a disadvantage, right? Because when I come at a matter, I'm quite
Resolute.
like it's a negotiation, right? And then I see
Sometimes it doesn't feel like a negotiation. For me, it feels like it's, okay, but that's because really I haven't honed my skills in negotiation.
yeah. And sometimes,
I struggle.
Of course, the response may come up into an emotional plea. I'm like, there's not, why are we getting to this way now? Really, it's just, let's negotiate, right? This is my proposal. Give me a counter proposal of what you think the ideal is.
Sometimes we just don't have.
But I'd like to hear your thoughts about how in our marriage, my way perhaps of negotiation has affected you and your side of the story that I may not see.
I think this is the thing. I think for me, okay, I don't know how to explain it. I think there is a part of me that comes from a background where negotiation is not something that happens quite a lot or happened quite a lot, especially growing up. Yes, there was opportunity for you to share your thoughts in some shape or form. I mean, I come from, my dad is ex-military.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything like ex-military. Once military, always military. Yeah, it's the law.
Yeah.
It's the rule of. It's against the rule of law. It's the law basically, and he's an amazing father.
Yeah.
But I think there's something. Being a military person and everything about your training is you don't question. When they tell you to jump, you ask how high. You understand? So that's the background that I grew up in. And then that was compounded by the fact that his faith.
Yeah.
It is a faith that is based, it is a rules-based faith.
Yeah.
Okay, not faith as we know it.
Yeah.
It's a rules-based religion.
Yeah.
This is what it says. This is what you do.
Yeah.
From my understanding, and maybe I misunderstood it, but I don't think I did. There are no in-betweens when it comes to the Islamic faith.
Yeah.
This is what it says you do. You don't ask questions, you don't negotiate, you don't X, Y, Z. That's all you have to do. So I think that sort of shaped a part of me significantly. And I think you would have noticed that many times when you would even suggest something, for me, it wasn't a question of, let me try and understand why. It was of run and deliver.
Run and deliver or start complaining.
Run and deliver or start complaining.
Yes.
But also I think the part that I've missed out, I think is also the way, and I think all these things are related, part of the way I approach my work in the corporate world. For me, it was, and this is something I prided myself a lot in, if you wanted me to toe the line, just tell me what the rules are. Tell me what the policy is.
Yeah.
Tell me why the policy is the way it is.
Yeah.
Let me appreciate it, and I will never deviate from the policy. That's just how I think over time I conditioned myself to be, and I think also because of my background. So when I come into marriage, and there's a part of me that knows, of course, after the initial phase of, my birthday, my friend, what, and I basically fell in line. I realized, you know what, this is not a friendship arrangement. Yes, there'll be time and a place where we talk as friends, which we do quite a lot, but he's my husband, he's the authority. So sometimes when you would say something, even if it was still in ideation stage, and you are still just proposing and just thinking out loud, for me, the moment it landed in my system, it was, this is what we're going to do. So in my mind, I'm already thinking, I need to start executing. Now, the grumbling was on account of if I didn't understand the why, and I wasn't necessarily going to ask why. You'll notice it took me a bit of time, because for me to ask why was commensurate to questioning.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Which is a bit interesting. I don't know if maybe first finish it.
Yeah, it was commensurate to questioning. But maybe it's also because I hadn't mastered the art of asking why in a way that didn't sound like it was confrontational. Because I was quite aggressive. Which aggression I think I picked from my work life. The corporate world. I learned to be quite aggressive. You understand? So I sort of came in with that. So when I asked the why, it was like confrontational.
Not negotiation.
Not negotiation.
Yeah.
But it was also because I wanted to understand. There was a part of me that wanted to understand the why, but there was also a part of me that didn't believe.
That was pushing back.
But now that kind of pushing back is not a negotiation.
Yes.
And even to date, I am still only learning how to negotiate with you. And it's also because you have sort of had to you sort of had to tweak yourself a bit so that it is obvious what you're sharing with me is not of run and execute, because I am an executor.
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes when you push me to think or initiate things, it's a struggle, because I have conditioned myself to be an executor.
But if your wife is just an executor, then the opportunity of two heads being better than one is lost.
I totally agree. And I noticed that some of the things that we've had more value out of is where I've actually applied my mind.
Yeah.
You understand? But also when you think about it from the corporate perspective, and I think this is one of the reasons why I struggled to lead teams or to even get into a position where I'm actually leading teams.
Yeah.
Because you see, when you're leading a team, you're not executing. You're at strategy level.
Yeah.
You are the leader. You are the head. You're thinking. You are inspiring people to work. And you're helping them along the journey.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot to do that, from my perspective.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to do that. But if you're part of a team and you're executing, it's easy to execute. I have no problem with execuation.
Yeah.
Until now you start getting me to try and that's why I struggle with the people in our home.
Which is interesting.
People who are working in our home. Because then I have to lead, I have to guide, I have to inspire. But if I'm doing the things myself, I can do them in my sleep.
And that's why sometimes even the conflicts between us is me trying to call you to think through with me.
Exactly.
In terms of something.
Exactly.
Right? So
now for me, I'm like, I want to execute. And that's the other struggle I have with you, where sometimes as the leader, you come up with an idea and it's not cast in stone because of your agile thinking. And I think it's informed probably by your work as a software engineer, where agility is the way you guys basically do your things.
Not all of us.
Not all of you, but the modern day you guys are very agile. Now for me, it's if this is what you said, then I already work out how it's going to work and I am going to run with it and I am going to deliver exceptionally. Now, the moment you take a step back...
The winner is if a guy goes in the wrong direction and is exception in the wrong direction.
I hear you, but you see, the guy goes, I've gone in the wrong direction and I'm exceptional, but that's the direction that we talked about.
Yeah, but it doesn't...
So for me, I've ticked a box.
Exactly.
I've ticked a box.
When you think about ticking your boxes, you're about getting your task done. But yet that task is meant to help us achieve a bigger objective.
A bigger goal.
Right?
And I think that's where personalities become an issue as well. personality types and not even skills, just the kind of person that you are makes a difference. So I think like there's something I had wanted to say around, when you try to now engage me to think along with you, and I'm thinking, this is too much work. Can you think about it, say what you want us to do, me, I'll execute. I will execute properly. Now, where I find challenges is where along the way, like I think I was saying, along the way, it shifts. Because already in my mind, I've already figured out how I'm going to execute. Now, when you shift a little bit, then there's a problem. But I think now I am sort of, if it were a dance, we're sort of getting in step a little bit. I'm like, okay, he said this. Keep it at the back of your mind. Maybe it's not even for executing now. Maybe it's still, and actually you sometimes you're very clear, like, I'm just saying it now.
It may change.
I am depositing it here. It might change. So I make a mental note. Don't start running ahead of yourself and making phone calls and doing things, because you know how I also like being overzealous. And I want to go over and beyond. So I'll even do tasks and then only to be pulled back. I'm like, but now I feel very frustrated. And I think that's one of the challenges that I faced initially of us working together. Because I brought my entire skill set and my personality and the way I was used to doing things, and I brought them into our space.
And in a way, it's the difference between working for a corporate company vis-a-vis a startup.
Yes, that was a major issue as well.
Yes, a corporate company is already, their processes are standard, the business models are standard. There's not
actually
much.
You have no business deviating from them.
Actually, that's
you are celebrated for sticking with the with the with everything that's in place.
And yet it turned out you excelled in the corporate world. Now imagine,
because I knew how to keep rules.
My life is more of I'm a startup guy, so agility is my way of response, right? It is just see a little bit and experiment with it, and if it goes the right direction, then continue with it.
And sorry for butting in, I've just seen something, and I've just had a light bulb moment. That person that was celebrated in the corporate space on account of my work ethic, which is a good work ethic in the corporate space, is the very reason I struggled in my faith and in my walk with God. Because God does not operate like that. He actually doesn't operate like that. It's very likely, not very likely, it is, if I were Abraham and God told me, leave everything you know and go to a land that I will show you, we would have a melee with God. Because how? How do I just start walking? You understand? It is inconceivable. To where? What if I meet things along the way that I can't deal with? I don't know how far you're going to take me, so I will not park appropriately. I need to know where I am going, so I park appropriately. I know how much food I'm going to pack. I know how much luggage I'm going to pack. I know how many days I'm going to need. You understand? And I think that's where I struggled, because I was so set in a certain way that when God was trying to nudge me in certain directions, it just couldn't work. You understand? And I think that's where for you, your walk was probably, your agility was not just something that you exercised in your work or in the rest of your life. It was also the same way you actually walked with God.
That's the man who gives everything of his away without knowing what the next thing is.
Yeah, because now for me, you tell me to leave my job, or how? How am I going to survive? You know, so I think it's prudent, I think, for, even as I say this now, it's prudent for us to sort of be quite introspective about how we've lived our lives and how the things that have shaped us and made us excel in a certain area, how they could be the very things that are holding us back
And that's actually
spiritually.
and that's actually powerful. And that is inertia. Inertia is Newton's law that says the body stays in its state of rest or uniform motion in a straight line unless acted on by an external force. That's the effect why when you're in a car and suddenly brake, you move forward. Is the body stays in its state of rest or uniform motion. So that was uniform motion in a straight line. So it's going until acted on by an external force. The seatbelt holds you back, right? Because even though the car stopped, the body is going to continue in that direction. So now some of us will go to new environments or new seasons of our lives, but we are still caught up in the setup of the old season, right? And that's where adaptation is important. And you can see the same thing with the move from singleness to being married, right? Where someone takes their singleness attributes and they want to continue the same way
In
married.
marriage, yeah.
You get? You want the same liberties of single while married, yet the dynamic has changed.
It's the man who still wants to hang with the boys.
Exactly.
Spend more time out away from home. Or it's the lady who, I think it's mostly on the men's side. Let me not put things.
I don't know.
No, it goes both ways.
And so it's a there's an inside there. It's a I think I lost it.
Does it have to do with the changing in the seasons?
Yes. So it's that place of being agile. Really is what agility is.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've learned, I noticed sometime that my life has a lot of change. But then it hit me that I walk almost every single day, and when I'm walking, I assess my life. Now, many people don't have many moments of assessing their lives. You may find someone had this. Sometime they assess and then put themselves in a direction. And they're
still going along.
So it's someone who's actually driving on a road and doesn't stop to check, am I still going in the right direction? You get? Someone can just be driving, but stop every once in a while and check. Let me check the Google Maps. Let me ask the strangers, am I on the right track?
Am I on track? Am I still on track?
Yes. Now, if every time you don't get a chance to reflect on how you're conducting yourself, it's easy to continue in a direction that, while it made sense for your original destination, but the next destination, it doesn't work, right? And that's also the challenge of when you think about church. There are churches where people are taught particular ways. This comes up in things like dreams, right? Where people say, this in the dream means this,
that.
right? So people don't have the ability to re-examine whether this one is still like it was then, right? Or it's someone told, this is what you should do. Because, for example, even when it gets to counsel, there's wisdom that may be right for a season, that may not be right for
the
another.
next.
You get? Now, there are those people who, it's one of the things you had that you lived by was akadenyuma kata.
Kata, yes.
Right? That goes backwards. That takes you backwards kills you. And you walked with it. And granted, the fact that they conjured it at one moment, it means there was truth in it.
If I'd actually followed that principle,
Yeah.
or if I'd been hell-bent on that principle,
Yeah.
we would not be married.
Exactly.
We would not be married.
Exactly.
Because I'd be like, we dated, that's it. Move
Now,
on to the next.
That actually brings me to something interesting that I thought we'd talk about, which is quite interesting. And this idea of first principles thinking. I learned first principles thinking from Elon Musk. And it's like, first principles thinking is deal with every situation as it is, right? For example, there's this person in your past. Okay? Why did you leave them? Okay? So they are here now. Why? You see? Now some people just say, "Na kadde nyumakata." You've blocked away your entire reason, capacity to reason, on account of this thing you have in your head, right?
This thing you live by, this principle that you live by.
This principle you live by, right? But the goal is to go to first principles. And this is powerful because that problem is not the principle. The goal is that focus on first principles, not higher level principles. In the sense that akade jumakata is a principle, but it's a principle that is more generic. It's more encompassing, right? But it's another principle of saying a man that is not considerate, right? Now there you go and say, okay, is Felix not considerate? Now you're making something on a first principle. They are foundational things, right? Like I knew for starters, I couldn't date a woman who drinks. You get? And
who consumes alcohol?
Yeah. and also a woman who parties, because that's not my life. Well, it's going to be troublesome, right? And one of the things that was interesting is that we used to spend a lot of time together without going out.
Yeah. we liked our indoors.
I think
because we like conversations.
Yes,
It's hard to have conversations when you're out. There's so much noise.
Actually,
and
out
so
you
much
don't get
distraction.
conversation.
No,
Exactly.
there's just
Right?
lots happening.
So now that is more of a
first
principles, right? So, and I think that when you understand first principles, it pushes to a place of you have to understand things to the detail. Now, the problem happens, most of the times you don't have the time or even the desire to acquire knowledge, to understand to get knowledge from the bottom so you can make first principles decisions, right? Recently, I was led back to studying about the atom, right? And what led me to the atom was...
So we call it a podcast?
Yeah.
Need to also listen to the signs.
That's true.
Yeah. I'm glad I did not insist on my principle. Not that I stood a chance.
Of what?
Bakadde nyumatekata. I didn't really stand a chance.
Thank God for wisdom.
I don't think there was any wisdom here. I didn't stand a chance.